Welcome to Read This, Author's Corner. I am your host, Alice Maria James, and I am so honored to have with me today author and educator Dawn Forrester Price, who is the author of the series Run to Freedom about the Maroons, the Jamaican freedom fighters. Welcome, Dawn. Welcome, Dawn. I am so excited to have you here to talk about Run to Freedom. But even before we start talking about what made you come up with this topic and this adventure, I would love for our audience to hear a little bit about you and what got you started on this journey.
Well, there are 2 points in my life that sparked this focus. And the first one was when I was 8 and my family, who was from Kingston, moved out of the city into the country where there was no electricity, there was no running water. I mean, it was very, very different. But our property was so full of different plants to learn about and trees to climb and so on. And I got very interested. And there was a little place where we did some archaeology because there were things to dig up and so on. And it was so different that I kept asking myself, is this what it was like back in the old days when people were just living in the bush, working on a farm? And then I got to thinking, what would I have been like if I had been forced to work? Because we helped our family, but it wasn't slave labor. And so because I did a lot of reading as a child, and still, I began to do some research. And every time something difficult came up, I asked myself, how would it have appeared to the people back in slavery? How would it have appeared? How would they have coped with it if they didn't have migraine medication, or if they didn't have a doctor to go to, or if the doctor didn't have the medication they needed? So that was the first time where I began to think of myself as part of a line of people who came before. Then when I moved to America and started having children, my children are biracial, and we lived in the Midwest, and they got a lot of flack about not being white enough or not being black enough. And because of that, I wanted to share with them this line of connection and belonging that I felt. And so that was the trigger for me, not to tell them a story, but to write them a story that they could climb into and begin to experience what it was like, and to learn all the responsibilities, but all the strength that we inherit from our forebears and what will carry us through whatever we need to go through. Well, that's how I began to write the book.
Wow, I didn't expect that, but that was just the fact that you were looking for the connection and seeing the connection and trying to imagine that. Wow. Okay. That speaks. I love it.
I think if I had remained living in the city, I would never have had that broadening of vision. And so I thank my parents for, buying that farm and moving us out to broaden our scope.
Yeah, that was great. I love that. I am so connected to what people are passionate about, because anybody can just put something together because someone says, oh, write this. Mm-hmm. I've been bombarded in the last few years with programs and things that say, oh, you could write a book within 24 hours. I'm like, yes. Not anything that anybody wants to read.
Right.
So when you know what creativity looks like, and you know creation comes from a place of passion. Understanding
Absolutely.
the place of passion helps you understand the creation. So,
Quite so. And it goes beyond that too, because I've been a teacher since I was 17 years old. Even before I went to university, I was teaching in what they call the Jamaica Teach Corps right out of high school, just learning to teach little guys. And I've always been impassioned by the search for truth and rectitude, historical accuracy, linguistic accuracy. I've taught English language and English literature and English as a second language all my life since I was out of university. And I just needed to, it took me a while to write the book because I had to do my research. I couldn't rely on my memory, because I'd been living in the States for a while, and you don't think about it. If you're not using it, it goes away. And so I did my proper research because I was not going to share with my kids anything that wasn't quite right. And because I passionately love to read historical fiction, I wouldn't let the genre down. And it ended up that not only did I write it for my kids, but for the kids in their schools. And I ended up, reading the initial one, Run to Freedom, for the kids in my children's middle school. And the parents were the ones who were even more excited because they kept saying, "Oh, wow, that was great. When are we getting the next one?" And it took me quite a while because I wasn't planning to write a series. I was just planning to do this book for my kids for that specific reason. And it turned out that it started a thirst among kids that I know in England and different places, and their parents and their teachers. And so it's not because the characters are from like preteen to the parents, it's family based, and the themes are really sort of accessible to everybody who is a human. If you don't have a family, there's a theme that you can pick up. If you do have a family, if you don't like to work, if you do like to work, it really explains for me what living in that environment, in that era, under those exigent circumstances were like, and the fact that people were able to continue to cling to life, cling to the love of their family, make something out of it, and not give up.
Yeah.
So I'm just really inspired by my forebears.
Yes. And what I thought was very interesting, the way you put the conversation between the free Maroons and the enslaved, giving those two positions and having the story be between the free and the enslaved.
Yes.
That was one aspect of it. But what I loved even more is the fact that the story is not about the enslaver enslaving the people. It is about the people living and working and striving to be free. It's not the enslaver story. It is the people story. And so talk to me a little bit about why you took that journey, because I so want to see more of that journey in pretty much all of the historical stories that I'm hearing about, because I feel quite often we tell the enslaver story, not our story. And I feel like you told our story, not the enslaver story.
I think one of the things, and this is all going back, we moved to the country when I was 8 years old. When I was 10 years old, Jamaica became independent, which was the final beat that started when the Maroons were fighting the British. We finally got to the point where we could declare independence from the colonizer. And when I was 10 and it was independence for the first time, it was, well, who are we? We are Jamaicans. We're no longer British. What does it mean to be a Jamaican? And I began to feel, and we all did, began to feel this pride in being Jamaican. And so that connected to okay, there's a line that left Africa and came to Jamaica. There are many other peoples who ended up on that island. We came and we found a few remaining groups of the Taino who were there at first. We had people who had been enslaved by the Spaniards who were left behind. And we had, any number of different tribes and languages that all went together to make Jamaican. And so I think at that point, I began to understand that there was a line that connected me way back. And so the diaspora that I'm a part of now started on the other side of the Atlantic. And so this is my duty at this point to share with anybody who is willing to understand the connection between your line of your ancestors and the strengths and challenges that they exhibited and fought, and how you are going to do it. And in the same way that I grew up in a multicultural Jamaica, I taught English as a second language for 20 years in America. And so I grew to know a different set of youngsters from different places. And there's always this cross-cultural communication. And I was able to help. So I think that independence really kind of triggered that understanding.
It allowed you to crystallize, like, who is this? Who are these people that are now?
Yes.
You had to form a new identity. It's not like you were born after independence; you were born before. So you're no longer British. You are just straight up Jamaican now.
Jamaican? No. What does that mean?
And we took that flag and we ran with it.
We certainly did. It was fabulous. I really, really, really feel very blessed that I was born at the time that I was born and was able to grow with my nation.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I love that you were able to grow with your nation. So now I love the characters' names. You have some great characters' names. So now you introduce us to Kofi and the Maroons, and you take us on this adventure. And it is such an imagination, your imagination to create this adventure. Share a little bit about where the genesis of the idea of Kofi and the Maroons, how did that come into play?
I have to tell you that I was the beneficiary of true inspiration because I was busy doing research. I didn't have a plot. I didn't have a plan. I just wanted to make sure that I was properly armed with facts. And my knowledge of the actual land, the country, which holds us all in Jamaica. What I meant when I was saying the land, because it is the land itself that triggered how we behaved. We had to interact with the land. And then I thought about, well, what's a family to do? The most important people in my life growing up was my family. I had 3 brothers and 2 sisters, and we were like a team. And I thought I would think, what would happen if Daddy were taken away from us? what, how would we react? And it was always a matter of putting myself and my family in the place of the ancestors, because I was truly, my heart bled for them. Even though I had my own challenges, I wanted to represent my people. But because my book was meant for my kids, and because I had started my relationship with these ancestors and questioning their lives and their successes and failures when I was a child at their age, the whole thing came together, and I was inspired to focus on the kids, and but within the context of the family and within the larger context of the plantation people, and outside of that, the Maroons and all that they stood for. And within all of this, let us not forget the plantocracy, because the planters were there with their, you can't just look at it from one viewpoint. Now, my protagonists are the main viewpoint, obviously, but I could not set them in an environment that wasn't a three-dimensional environment.
Yes, yeah, and I see that, and I also see where, like Kofi in the beginning had a vision of what it would be like to be free.
And we need to open ourselves to learning what we have to do, and then it's going to take that strength of character, that determination, that you're just going to plug ahead and come what come may, you're going to have to keep going, which is what Kofi did amazingly in his efforts to not only escape, but to rescue his family.
Yes, yes. So now that we kind of set the stage of where the inspiration came from, and that we have this three-dimensional story going on, kind of take us into the story as to what tidbit or what tease can you tease about the story, whether it's your reading or even before you're reading, if you want to set a stage for us. It's for you.
I selected a piece to read for you from Run to Freedom that focuses on Kofi at an age where he wants to be off playing with his friend Morgan. But he has responsibilities. And if he doesn't do what he's required to do, then he can be punished. Kids don't necessarily have an overseer with a horse and a whip, but kids today have their own version of, this is what I would like to do, but this is what is required of me. And even though it isn't life-threatening for our kids, in the long run, the choices that they make reflect in their life to come. So let me read a little bit about Kofi, who has been working in the field, and he has hurt himself with the cutlass. No, it wasn't the cutlass, it was grass that cut him. And he was trying to go pick something, a herb to put on it, and he got in trouble with the supervisor, the overseer, because it doesn't matter if your hand is bleeding, you stay there and work. And so he gets caught. I think that you're really looking for trouble, says Mr. Campbell. The overseer's piercing blue eyes held Kofi immobile while he stroked the coiled whip which hung from his saddle. I can get the simple Bible later, Massa. Sorry, Massa. Kofi stumbled over the words as he edged backwards, away from the powerful man on the huge horse. He turned and bolted for his section and fell to work again with a will, thankful to have escaped his without a taste of the whip. Kofi could barely contain his anger and fear as the muffled sound of the horse's hooves thudded past slowly. Psst! The sound came from a row behind. Kofi turned around uncertainly and peered through the long, narrow leaves to see Morgan swaggering up and down in a parody of the overseer. Morgan's antics always made Kofi laugh, and the boys stifled their giggles. Morgan had succeeded in lifting his spirits. Kofi was glad to see his friend carefully ease his body through a gap in the cane to join him in his row. "Let me bandage up the hand for you." He produced a sweat-soaked rag and bound Kofi's bleeding hand securely. "You're good as gold now, Kofi." Morgan pulled a hand-carved top from his pocket. "Want to play? Master just gone, so now is the best time." Before him finish another round. Kofi pulled a similar top from his pocket, and the boys squatted down on the hard, packed earth between the cane rows, spinning their tops and trying to get them to sleep. Kofi managed to stop the wobble on his top, and it whirred smoothly on a flat rock embedded in the soil. He reached down and carefully coaxed the purring top onto his palm. Morgan started his gig spinning on the rock. Kofi, watching the toy intently, slowly straightened up, maintaining the balance. The top still hummed on his flattened palm. He grinned with satisfaction. Morgan crouched down and crooned to his top on the stone, singing a lullaby. Suddenly, Kofi heard a loud crack.
I said, so it wasn't a safe time to play after all.
No, the overseer fooled them by leaving his horse.
No, you had Kofi travel to the Maroons and with a message. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was a very powerful scene in the book where he does this journey, proves himself a man of resilience. People didn't even know who he was, but the fact that he was able to pass through the blue hole and get there gave them such respect for him. I thought that was a very unique way you used to give him credibility without him even knowing that he had done something so significant. I'd love to kind of delve into, wow, where did that idea come from? That was such a significant idea.
One of the things that writers have to do is not just observe, but also listen. And if you have a good idea of who your characters are and what your setting is and what your environment is, then you can let them loose in there and they will find a way to do what needs to be done. And that's what I did with this.
Actually, I'm listening to you explain your writing process, and it almost feels like to me that there's a movie going on inside your head of what your characters are doing, and you actually just took that movie and put it down on paper.
And just write it down. It's like, yep, this is what they're up to. Okay, I'm surprised, but okay.
and that's what I was trying to get at, because people have different processes, right? And there's no wrong or right way.
No.
But in listening to you, and I'm asking, what inspired this? What happened? And now when you said, like, the characters are just off doing their own thing. So I'm a very visual person because I too come from like that creative background. So I always have, you say something and it's a movie a projector that comes on in my head and I'm visualizing what you're saying. So to listen to you tell how the story has come together, and just the words of like the characters are off doing their own thing. I just saw the vision in your head, the movie playing, you're looking at this scene, but in the background, you know that there's another scene over there that's already playing out. Oh, that's so fantastic.
And
That is
it's equally
absolutely
exciting for
fantastic.
me because I allow the inspiration to come in. I am so surprised a lot of the times, and other writers will tell you that they really didn't expect the character to do that. You know, I mean,
Yeah.
I remember when I was writing the first part of Hinterland, and there is a character there that I did not expect her to be anything more than an extra. You know, she was going to walk on and walk off. And she just took over everything. And she was the linchpin of so much. And I had to just sort of let her do her thing. And to me, I was just blessed by that, though, you know, because it certainly wasn't in the plot. I didn't plan it, but some people have everything plotted out in a mathematical way, and I don't function
I
very
love
well
it.
in that.
I absolutely, you don't know how excited listening to this has made me, just because it is so, for me, I tell people that I want people to get to know the author. I want people to know this person that wrote the book. And quite often, as you say, a lot of people hear from the authors that, like, this is the plot, and well, it's the hero's tale. So we did this, 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 and
Yes,
this, and then we flip back around to the, and you could almost see that played out in the story. So the nuances and the originality and all of the stuff that comes into play doesn't necessarily come into play so
doesn't necessarily
authentically.
make it in. Mm-hmm.
But when you hear someone say that there was this, the characters were off doing their own things, there were these events, there was this movie going on in my head, and I put what was in my head on paper, but I did the research to back up
Yeah.
the fiction that my mind created. I did the research to incorporate the facts. I believe that I genuinely believe that understanding could help a multitude of writers,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because I believe a lot of people feel that they have this idea, but they're trying to squeeze the idea
Squeeze
into the
it in,
box.
right? Yeah. Yeah, because I have other friends who are authors who will say to me, well, Dawn, this is a so and so, and this is a so and so, and you should. And I keep saying, I have to listen to my people, and my ancestors have stuff to tell me, and my characters are playing it out. So, yes, it's not that I have no framework. I have a framework. I have the facts. I have the context. I know what the ground looks like, what the trees look like, how the water comes out of the rock. I know all of that. And then within the context, and also, I do very deep backstories for my characters.
I've heard all the ways that the books have been formulated
Mm-hmm.
to get a
Yes, per
certain
genre.
result.
If you're doing this genre, then you must have this structure. And if you're doing this genre, then you have either this structure or that structure, which is really good to know. But it
But it
doesn't
takes
work
some
for
of the
me.
creativity away from it, because you don't allow the authenticity of your thoughts
Mm-hmm.
to meet the paper. Because if you
Mm-hmm.
don't necessarily see it fitting into that box,
Yeah, it has to be organic. I mean, it has to grow from truth. And I'm not forcing them. I mean, like I said about that character at the beginning of Run to Freedom Hinterland, she was there, but something about her response triggered other things that fit nicely into the plot, but I certainly didn't have them figured out,
Right.
and so had I not wanted to do it in a more sort of organic way, I would have tamped her down because she wasn't doing what I expected her to do. And she turned out to be a true treasure. So I
Yeah,
learned something
yes.
from her.
I love when true creativity can come forth and reinvent the rules.
Yeah, and it is a blessing because life, the surprises in life are some of the
Yes,
most valuable things that we encounter.
exactly.
And not only do the surprises challenge you, but they also liberate you and they
And they
allow you
teach
to
you.
grow.
They
Exactly,
teach
they
you.
let you grow.
The surprises, challenges in life are your best educators and your best growth um, things to help you grow.
Opportunities. Mm.
I was sharing with somebody earlier today that I was a fan of a motivational speaker of the 80s. His name was Jim Rowans, and he would always say, don't ask for things to be easier, ask to be better. Because there's
Yes,
no growth in having things easier, but there's a
easier,
whole lot of
exactly.
growth when you get better to handle the challenges that are you're up against. And I'm so excited about your process of
Mhm.
letting the characters speak to you. Um, and again, this doesn't say you don't know the rules of writing. What it says is that there's so much more authenticity of the characters if you let them happen the way life happens. It's almost like if you have a child and you're raising your child and you've kind of plotted out what you think the child's going to do, and like, oh, he's going to be a
Right,
doctor or a math. He likes
right.
math. And then they're like, no, I like to draw. And you get that.
Exactly.
Okay, we got to
Right.
switch. So that's what I see when I hear you talk about your creative process. It's like this is your child that you're raising. The story is your child that you're raising, and the characters are developing, and you're letting them develop. You're not forcing them into um, any kind of preconceived notion that you have. What else would you like to share with the audience about your book before we wrap up?
Well, I think even though the protagonists of Run to Freedom and the sequel are young people, as I said, there are themes that touch on the strength of women, the requirements of trust, the physical demands that we all have to go through, but the the appeal of something of this focus, because it is focused on the people within the cultural context and the historical context. To me, this is what I would have wanted to read when I was a kid. It's also what I want to read now. And so, because it is such an overarching view, it is viable for elementary school. You see the teacher again, elementary school, high school, college level. It just depends on what your standards are that you're trying to hit. And You can use it for history, for literature. You can learn about, kids are going to be much more excited working on something that's a story than sitting down with their textbook and saying, well, this happened on such and such a date, and the treaty was in such and such a March, 1739.
Right.
And I was just deadly bored with history when I was in high school. And then the teachers are going to be able to use it not only to teach, but to expand the awareness of their learners, to be able to bring, it's a tool, right? It is a tool that you can use in more exciting ways than with like a traditional textbook. And so I would like to encourage people to read it for fun, to use it to teach language, to use it to teach culture, to use it to teach things like how a disparate set of people can come together. And out of all of that can come something like a new language, like the Jamaican language, which developed out of all of those different sets of people coming together with their languages. Not all the Africans spoke the same language.
Right.
So there were lots and lots of opportunities for people to misunderstand their friends and their foes. So communication is at the heart of all of this. So that's what I think this book is, my effort to communicate.
Thank you for the use of it as an educational tool. Like, thank you for sharing that with me, because that's extremely important. And the way you've done the book also, because you focused on young people, but you gave a lot of respect for their elders. You see the elders, you see the young people, you see the parents. There is the whole dichotomy of the family that you have in the book. And I do see where it can be useful for all ages, from children telling a childless story to being an adult and wanting to hear this adventure, because it is an adventure. And I thank you so much for your time. And I appreciate your talent, and I love your process. I love your process because I connect so well to just being able to see things in my mind and wanting to get what's in my head down on paper. I draw, so I use the process, but a little bit differently. So that was a soul to soul kind of connection that I made there with what you were sharing. Thanks again. And
well, thank you for allowing me to share my passion with you.
It was wonderful. It was wonderful. I would like to thank Dawn Forrester Price for joining us today to talk about Run to Freedom, her wonderful adventure. Please go out and pick up a copy. This has been Read This, Author's Corner. I am your host, Alice Maria James. Keep reading, keep growing, and stay empowered.